Okay, well, here.
Yep.
You got our wheel of life ready to spin?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm joined by my colleagues in the United States Senate, my Democratic colleagues, and those groups who continue to be strong advocates for women and making sure that women get equal pay for equal work. Today we're talking about the fact that next Tuesday, April 12th, will be Equal Pay Day. It symbolizes how far into 2016 women must work to bridge the gap what men earn. In 2015, we continue to be paid less than men, 79 cents for every dollar. And then in certain ethnic groups, for people of color, it's even far less. We're here to stand here today for equal pay to make sure women get a fair shot at the American dream. I'm asking, in behalf of all my colleagues, that we advocate for the passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act. The Paycheck Fairness Act is the legislative framework that really closes every loophole where women can continue, where corporations can continue to pay women less and to exploit loopholes in the current law. We must pass Paycheck Fairness Act. You know, we've been fighting for this ever since 1963, when Lyndon Johnson moved forward to pass his famous civil rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. He started with equal pay because he thought it would be the easiest. Well, here we are now, 53 years later, fighting for the same thing. It's time we get the job done. Let's finish what we started with Lilly Ledbetter. In 50 years, we've only gained 19 cents. Wow. By that, and if you do the math, it means we would have to wait to 2058 to make equal pay. Well, that just doesn't go. And what we're also worried about is that women who fight for equal pay are either sidelined, or they're redlined, or they're pink-slipped, or they're harassed and they're intimidated. We need to do the job. Now, people say, Senator Barb, in 2009, didn't we do this with the Lilly Ledbetter Act? Well, the Lilly Ledbetter Act reversed a terrible Supreme Court decision that was slamming the courthouse door on women who wanted to sue for paycheck discrimination. We kept the courthouse doors open, but unfortunately, the loophole doors have continued to stay open. Close the loopholes. Finish the job we started with Lilly Ledbetter. Do it by passing Paycheck Fairness. What does Paycheck Fairness does? It stops retaliation for sharing pay information. Right now, the most dangerous place for women in equal pay is when they ask, how much do you make? And if you ask another fellow worker, what are they getting paid? You can be fired. Or if a good guy says, we want to tell you what we get paid, there you are, a computer operator, there you are, an x-ray technician. Again, clear metrics on the same job but not the same pay. That person who tells you the information can be fired. We want to close that loophole. Right now, businesses use excuses to pay women less. Oh, he's a breadwinner. How many single mothers do we know? We are breadwinners ourselves, and we are tired of paycheck crumbs. We are the breadwinners. Don't give us paycheck crumbs. And the other is we want to be able to pursue punitive damages. Back pay just isn't enough. For we women, it costs more to be a woman. We pay more for everything. We continue to have to fight the battle of more expensive medical care, child care, even dry cleaning. They charge us more to do our blouses than guys' shirts. We women are tired of being taken to the cleaners. Pass Paycheck Fairness. And we have all kinds of people fighting this. Are we proud of our soccer team?
Yes. Wow.
So would they kick the ball to victory? They're going to kick the ball for anti-discrimination, and we're going to do some kicking of you-know-what ourselves. Pass Paycheck Fairness. Now, there are other bills out there. We call them Trojan horse bills. They're well-intentioned, but they keep the loophole for pay parity. They create retaliation safe havens, and they impose fines on employers, not punitive damages. Others will talk about that. We don't want that legislation. We want a bill that's the real deal so you get real pay. We just want to be able to say, close the pay gap. Now, we know we've been at this battle a long time, but we're at it again, and we'll be at it again, and we'll be at it again. So as we move forward to fight for equal pay, I say once again, as I said before, square your shoulders. Put your lipstick on, or for the guys, chapstick. And put that lipstick on, and we've got to fight. The revolution is now, let's get it going. And move forward and pass Paycheck Fairness Act and get the real job done to put real money in the federal checkbook. Now I'd like... Should I pass the lipstick to you, Senator? So now I'd like to call up to the podium.
Want to spin the wheel, Barb? Oh. Or you want Patty?
I'll spin.
Patty spin.
I'll spin.
Patty spin it.
I'm going to turn to Senator Murray to stand on up. Then you step down. It's the wheel of life. We go around in circles and we end up with...
You know what that means?
You're fired. Patty, there you go again, asking questions.
There you go.
Here you go. Senator Murray.
Oh, well,
She might want the podium.
that's all right. I'm good.
You want the podium?
All right, you're fired. Gail accidentally found out from a male coworker that he was making $100 a week more than her, even though he did the same manufacturing job and worked the same hours. When Gail confronted her manager and asked for a raise, he became very angry and told Gail she could be fired for discussing her wages with another employee. Gail would be protected under the Paycheck Fairness Act, but she would be out of luck under the Workplace Advancement Act and would only be protected under the GAP Act if she hadn't signed a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality statement. We're not into the "you're fired" scenario here. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to know what their coworkers are getting without being threatened. They have a right to know that so that they can get equal pay. Women in the workplace, no matter where they live, no matter their background, no matter what career that they choose, on average earn less than their male colleagues. Even Olympic gold medalists and World Cup champions playing for the U.S. national soccer team don't get paid on par with their male counterparts. And it's not just about the money. Think about the message that the wage gap sends to young girls who see women valued less than men doing the same work, and in the case of the women's soccer team, doing it a lot better. The pay gap isn't just unfair to women, it hurts families, it hurts our economy, and today 60% of working families rely on wages from two earners. And more than ever, women are likely to be the primary breadwinner for their family. Women's success in today's economy is critical to their family's economic security and to our national economy as a whole. We need to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act to help close the wage gap. I so appreciate Senator Mikulski's longtime tremendous leadership and passion on this issue. Passing the Paycheck Fairness Act is a critical step in a long list of things that we need to do to build our economy from the middle out, not from the top down, and make sure our country works for all of our families, not just the wealthiest few. I look forward to an equal pay day in the future that we can actually celebrate once we finally achieve pay equity regardless of gender. And until then, I, along with all of my colleagues, are going to keep fighting on behalf of all women and families until they get the equal pay they have earned, and that is so they don't hear you're fired. Thank you very much.
That's great. Excellent.
gonna get on this side.
Yes.
Okay, on the next one. American Indian, Alaska Native, 59 cents.
59 cents.
59 cents on a dollar if you're an Alaskan woman, Native American. It's unbelievable. Oh, I'm so tall.
Don't you feel good about
I feel very odd, actually. Well, we are here with a simple message. The first one is, hooray, Barbara Mikulski. Yes. We love you. You are our fierce leader on this. And, you know, the one thing I know after all these years is the true secret to success is focus, focus, focus. And if you take your eye off the ball, you never get there. And we're not taking our eye off this ball. Barbara wouldn't let us. But even after Barbara leaves and I leave, the people up here are going to be pushing as hard as they always have been and even more for us. Listen, women make 79 cents for every dollar made by a man for doing the same work. If you asked anyone out on the street if that's fair, they would say, of course not. And every year, you know what that adds up to? $11,000. Now remember, for a woman who happens to be a Native American in Alaska, it's even a worse situation. But just think of what an American family could buy for $11,000. 1 year of groceries, a used car. In some places, it could cover a year of rent or a year of daycare. So this isn't just some, intellectual discussion we're having in a salon somewhere. This is what Barbara calls macaroni and cheese issues. They're the real issues. They're the kitchen table issues. Now, you remember that number, $11,000 a year. What does it cost a woman over her entire career? Almost $500,000. $500,000. $500,000 could send 3 students to the University of California for a top-notch education for 4 years. A mortgage could be paid off for that. So someone could go into their retirement years with no mortgage. The wage gap also hurts our consumer economy. Economists tell us consumer spending counts for 70% of our economy, and our expert on the economy, Elizabeth Warren, knows this to be a fact. In 2012, pay discrimination cost the consumer economy, because that money stayed with the bosses, okay, who were getting $30 million bonuses, I might say, in some cases. Pay discrimination cost the consumer economy $447 billion in 1 year. Those billions could have been spent at the grocery store, the gas station, at a local restaurant. So here is a fact, an important fact. When women aren't paid what they deserve, we all suffer. America suffers. The economy suffers. Our family suffers. Our bill, the Paycheck Fairness Act, does 3 things, and Barbara went through them, but I'm going to mention them very briefly because I think we have to digest this. 1, puts gender-based pay discrimination on equal footing with other forms of wage discrimination such as race, disability, or age. Okay? 2, prohibits employers from retaliating against employees who share salary information with their coworkers. And 3, requires real work-related reasons for a difference in pay. You'd have to prove you're paying the woman less because she's doing a lesser job. So, in closing, let me say this. This bill will help our economy. This bill will help our families for generations to come. It is the smart thing to do. It is the right thing to do. So, let's just do it. Thank you. Senator Stabenow. Yes, I don't think you need this.
All right.
You don't need that. Debbie, I'm getting out of your way.
All right, 75 cents. White woman. All right. Actually, first let me say, it's wonderful to be here with colleagues and advocates who care deeply. And we're not going to stop until this gets fixed, until every one of those numbers says dollar for dollar. But I particularly want to thank Senator Barbara Mikulski, and she is our champion on this. And we are suiting up every day and going in.
Tell them why we wear red.
And we are wearing red because this is the color of equal pay day, and we're sick and tired of women being in the red, and they need to get equal pay for equal work. So let me read, and this actually is convenient because this is the story I was going to tell. I assume this is coordinated. This is very good. A woman in Michigan, northern Michigan, Carrie Sleeman. She worked for 5 years at a company in what we call the Upper Peninsula. Does anyone know what we call it? The UP, the Upper Peninsula. That's where there is still snow at the moment, a lot of it. But she worked as an engineer at a company that designed, built, and installed laser welting assembly systems. And when she was hired, Sleeman said company officials told her they didn't negotiate pay. And in 2003, the company was forced into bankruptcy, and employees had to go through bankruptcy court for their final paychecks. And when she looked at the court's list of claims, she really was heartbroken. And this is something she told me personally, and she has testified here in the United States Senate. The people that she had supervised, the men that she had supervised, had larger claims for 2 weeks of pay than she did. And when we talked about what this would mean for her, she said, well, first of all, in her case, if she'd had equal pay, she could have helped pay for her mother's breast cancer treatment, her husband's heart surgery, tuition for her nieces and nephews she was trying to help, or put money into her own retirement before her company went bankrupt. So this is real. This is real, and we're so proud of the U.S. women's national soccer team for stepping up and having the courage, and we back them up 1,000%. But we need to back up every single woman, Carrie, every woman who's stepping forward to say they deserve equal pay for equal work. The last time I looked, if you ever go into a dollar store, there's not a 75-cent store for white women. You know, there's not a 84-cent store for Asian women. The fact of the matter is we pay as much as everybody else. We should get paid as much as everybody else. Thank you. Senator Warren.
All right, so another turn of the wheel here. All right. Hispanic Latino.
All right. I'm going to let you come over here.
All right. So the story I'm to tell is about Aline Rizzo. After working as a math consultant at a California county office for 3 years, Eileen learned over lunch that a man who was just hired had started at a much higher salary. After trying unsuccessfully to work out the disparity with human resources, she filed a lawsuit. Why? Because of her 2 young daughters. Quote, I don't want another girl to feel after she's worked so hard that she is not worth the same as the man sitting next to her. Good for you, Eileen. Boy, I'm for that. I'm for that. So I'm glad we have these stories because Hispanic and Latino women, they're earning 55 cents on the dollar for white men, and this is fundamentally wrong. I am glad to be here today in support of Paycheck Fairness Act introduced by Senator Mikulski. Senator Mikulski has been a powerful champion for women in the workplace through her efforts to pass the Lilly Ledbetter Act and to advance equal pay for equal work. And we are all proud to be standing here with her today. You know, we'll give her one more round of applause even though she's not here. Absolutely. You know, we hear a lot about how the economy is improving, and there's a lot of data to point to. Unemployment has fallen to below 5%. GDP continues to rise. The stock market is up. But too many families across the country feel like the game is rigged against them. They work hard, they play by the rules, and they still struggle to make ends meet. Here's the thing. They're right. The game is rigged against working families, and unequal pay is a part of that. Wages overall have not kept pace with productivity over the past 3 decades for all workers. And for women, this gap is compounded by pay discrimination. If we closed the productivity gap and the gender gap from 1979 to 2014, women's median hourly wages would be 70% higher today. Think about what that means. The game is rigged when women earn less than men for doing the same work. The game is rigged when a woman can be fired for just asking how much the guy down the hall makes for doing the same job. This has to stop. The fact is, for middle-class families, it takes two incomes to get by these days, and many families depend as much, if not more, on a woman's salary as they do on a man's. Women are the main or joint breadwinners in 2/3 of families in America today. And for women who are single parents, lower salaries make it that much harder to stay afloat. Equal pay for equal work is about basic fairness, and it is a key part of our work to rebuild the economy and to strengthen the middle class. I am very pleased and honored to be standing here with my colleagues today to urge the Senate to pass Senator Mikulski's Paycheck Fairness Act to level the playing field for hardworking women all across this country. Thank you. Thank you.
So Liz started out as a cashier at a large national retail store in Florida and worked her way up to customer service manager after 3 years. Although she consistently received excellent performance reviews and had 20 years of retail experience, she wasn't being promoted or given a raise as quickly as some of her male coworkers with less experience. When Liz complained to her district manager, her hours were cut back. A few weeks later, Liz found an anonymous note in her purse revealing that she was being paid $1.50 less than her male customer service managers. So this is a story that is all too familiar across our country, and that's why we're here to help Senator Mikulski make sure this legislation becomes law. We've all heard the statistics, and Liz was just another example of what happens to real people every day. In my state, along with Senator Murray, a typical woman working full-time earns $41,000 per year. A man working that same job earns $53,000 a year, a $12 difference. That means less money to put food on the table. It means less money to pay for rent or children's clothing or health insurance premiums or even saving for retirement. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is that this affects a lot of men too. That is, when a woman is a breadwinner in a family and her husband is also depending on their family for this support, it hurts the entire family. And that's why we need to recognize that women are breadwinners too. Just last week, the U.S. women's soccer team brought this issue to the forefront, and despite earning more revenue, attracting more viewers, doing a great job, the U.S. women's soccer team still gets paid 25% less than the men's team. So this, unfortunately, is not confined just to soccer, but I had a tough time at a coffee this morning explaining to a young girl from the South Sound region who was an athlete too, what was I going to do to make sure that in the future she too got fair compensation. So this isn't just about the soccer athletes, but about a wide range of professionals, including educators, realtors, businesswomen. And regardless of what field they work in, one thing is clear. 16 years into the 21st century, women deserve to be on an even playing field. That's why we need to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act soon.
Good afternoon, aloha. I'm Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii. I'm glad to join my colleagues here in pointing out once again that in spite of the fact that we've had equal pay laws on the books for decades, that here we are once again talking about the need to put some teeth into these laws so that women in our country can be treated fairly in terms of their economic pay. Now, in my own family, my mother was the sole breadwinner, and she raised 3 children by herself on low pay. In Hawaii, there's some 56,000 women who are the breadwinners, who are the heads of household. when they're making approximately $6,000 less every year in Hawaii, we're talking about actual, money to pay for rent, money for groceries, money for all the necessities in life. And of course, as the woman reaches retirement age, it totally affects the Social Security and other retirement benefits that the woman can look forward to. So it is amazing to me that year after year we have to come back and call for this kind of legislation so that women who represent a huge part of the middle class can get into the middle class, stay in the middle class, support their families, support themselves, and obtain some economic justice in our country. It truly is about focusing on middle-class families who are, as we know, just getting it in the neck at every turn. And yes, there was mention of the fact that if a woman asks how much she's getting paid or what the pay schedule is in her workplace, that there's usually retaliation. There are studies that indicate that. And so the kind of legislation that we're looking at will prevent those kinds of actions taken against someone who just wants to be treated fairly. I'd like to now turn to Ben Cardin of Maryland to give his remarks.
Mazie, thank you very much. I'm a proud Marylander, and I'm proud of our senior Senator Barbara Mikulski and her incredible leadership on behalf of Paycheck Fairness. What a legacy she has left here in the United States Senate. And she's not finished. She still has 9 months left, and we're going to pass Paycheck Fairness, right? We're going to get that done. As Senator Cantwell said, this is an issue that just does not affect women. It affects everyone in our country. It affects families. It affects our economy. It affects all of us. And that's why we're here together, united, on behalf of Paycheck Fairness. Another hat that I wear is I'm the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And in that responsibility, I need to marshal our international development assistance, see how well countries are doing around the world. And I can tell you the way you can judge how well a country is doing is how well they treat women. Gender issues are critically important to the success of a country. We see that over and over again. The inclusion of women in policymaking means they're going to make better decisions. They invest in children and families and education. It's how countries grow. But the United States needs to take care of business at home first before we can lecture to other countries. And that means it is unacceptable that women have to work 5 days doing the same work that men get paid for 4 days. And that's just not right. Paycheck fairness should have been passed a long time ago. I'm proud to support my colleagues here today to do everything I can to get paycheck fairness a reality in this country so that we can show the world that the United States truly is a leader on gender issues and that we not only treat our workers fairly and don't discriminate, but we also grow our economy and we all benefit. I'm proud to be a strong supporter of paycheck fairness. Let's get it done. And with that, let me turn it over to Senator Franken.
Do you need a turn of the old... is this supposed to be left a chance, or do you want me to... Well, we'll see what happens. White. Wait, I'm on the border between... Go with the African. Okay. Well, if you're on the border, okay. This is from Cheryl Hughes of Michigan. Cheryl Hughes was a divorced mother of two when she began to pursue an engineering degree in 1982. She dealt with an overwhelming male majority in the field and found a balance between motherhood and being a student, but she couldn't overcome pay inequity. Hughes said she lost more than $1 million in earnings throughout her career as an engineer because she is an African-American woman, and we do have... There is a disparity in the numbers, a difference in numbers in those kind of fields. When I think about pay inequity and just the importance of equal pay, I think about my mother-in-law, Fran, and my wife's Franny. My wife's a junior, I guess, if you're a junior, if you're a woman, but she's a junior. And my mother-in-law, Fran, was widowed at age 29 with 5 kids. And the youngest, my wife was 18 months old, and her younger sister was 3 months old. And they made it. They got some Social Security survivor benefits, but other than that, they were living on Franny's mom's, on Fran's salary. And this is the story around America. 40% of kids are with single moms in this country. And according to a new study from the National Women's Law Center, women make an average of $430,000 less over the course of their career than a man. And for Black and Latina women, that gap can reach up to $1.8 million. So this $1 million that she's talking about over an engineering career makes real sense. And I just, to add to this, I just want to read some quotes from folks from my state. Dixie from Brainerd writes, quote, "I work as hard and as long as the man that sits next to me in our office. Please support the Paycheck Fairness Act. Thank God we have 2 wage earners in our family. I know I would not be able to make it on my own wages," unquote. Joanne from New London, Minnesota writes, quote, "When I went into the workforce, I was told women are paid less than men because they aren't supporting a family like men are. This wasn't necessarily true back then, as I knew women who were the sole support of their families, and it is certainly not true now," unquote. And David from Excelsior writes, "My wife is the primary income for our family. Tell me why her pay should be discriminated down because she is a woman." So that is a sample. We do have some good news in my state. Rochester, Minneapolis, and St. Paul were just named as the best places for women in the workforce in the country, as some of the best places. So I'm proud of that. This is, the time has come for this. The time came for this a while ago, but we need to put more teeth into this act, and this is the way to do it, and we can't get it done too soon. And with that, I want to introduce a man who was Attorney General for the state of Connecticut for 87 years, Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you. I would say there's no one I would rather have introduced me, except that would be a lie. I have immense respect for Senator Franken and his crusade, as so many of my male colleagues have done, and I am apologetic that I'm, I think, the last senator standing between the advocates who are really doing the work. They're in the trenches. They're in the forefront of this effort, and I want to express my appreciation to all of you who day in and day out work for this supremely important cause, which is profoundly significant to me, not only as a lawyer and a senator, as a public official, but also as a dad. I want this world to be different for my daughter. And you know what? My 3 sons agree. I think if there is a generational divide here, it is between older folks who are living in a world that's static and inequitable, unfair, and younger people who get it, who just accept that women ought to be paid the same for the same work. And that's what this bill does. Now, since we're talking about women, I want to give a great big shout out and thanks to the University of Connecticut women's basketball team. And say that what's happening in restaurants and construction sites and boardrooms and law firms in unequal pay is also happening on the athletic field. And my thanks and congratulations to the 5 brave women soccer players who are standing up and speaking out by coming forward and bringing a legal action to stop the overt, intolerable discrimination in pay in women's soccer. The 5 brave members of the United States women's national soccer team are speaking for all of their colleagues when they say, we play the same game, we wear a jersey with the same country's name, we have the same work requirements, and by the way, we win a lot more than the men do, but we are paid less. And this issue is more than just about a game, because athletes are role models. Athletes inspire others to do that same work as well as they do, to meet and exceed the standards that have been set by others before them and the records that others compile. And these women are heroes, not just for the great performance on the field, but their courage in seeking fair pay for equal work. And I hope they will be regarded as role models here and around the world. This measure is necessary because their fight is likely to be slowed down and perhaps bogged down by a system that right now is overly time-consuming, costly, and cumbersome. They should not have to do this legal process. And this bill will help them and countless other women overcome the inequities of the workplace, seek fair pay, raise their families, and maybe most important, their children. Nothing is more important to ending children's poverty in this country than pay equity. And so let's get on with this measure. Let's get it done. Thank you, Barbara Mikulski and all my colleagues and the great advocates who are here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here with so many passionate leaders in the Senate, led by the ever-mighty Senator Mikulski. My name is Vicki Szabo, and I'm Vice President at the National Partnership for Women and Families here in Washington, D.C. It's clear from all of the stories, from all of the data, that the wage gap punishes families across race, ethnicity, occupation, industry, and caregiving status. It also exists across geography. According to some research that we'll be putting out at the beginning of next week, the wage gap cuts across every state and all but 10 congressional districts in the United States. It is everywhere, it's pernicious, and it's appalling. My son was 5 2 years ago, and when he learned about the wage gap, he automatically, intuitively, without any knowledge whatsoever, said, that is totally unfair, and it means that women can't pay their bills like a man can. He's 5. If he can figure that out, this is something we should be taking action on. Whether it's 79 cents or 60 cents or 55 cents, anything less than $1 paid to a woman that is also paid to a man is unacceptable. When more than 15 million households in the United States are headed by women and a third of those are living in poverty, the income loss to the wage gap is devastating, literally devastating, and Senator Blumenthal put it better than anybody else can. Fortunately, this is a problem that members of Congress in both parties are now recognizing, and now the challenge is to figure out what is the real solution. That's where the Paycheck Fairness Act comes in. Paycheck Fairness Act is absolutely critical. It combats harmful wage discrimination, and it gives women and employers the tools that they need to fight unfair pay practices. We also need higher wages, and we can't lose sight of that. Higher wages raising the minimum wage. We need family-friendly policies that make sure that caregivers can take time away from work without losing their jobs or losing income, and that women in particular stay attached to the workforce to earn for their families and increase their wages over time. It is past time to recognize that fair pay must be the law of the land. And until we celebrate Equal Pay Day, not in April, not in March, not in February, and not in January, but on New Year's Eve, we will not stop fighting. So thank you, and we will all take questions at the end.
Hi, I'm Emily Martin from the National Women's Law Center. You see the wage gap numbers, 79 cents for women overall, 60 cents for African American women. 55 cents for Latinas, we know that these numbers mean that women's paychecks take a big hit. But I want to return to what Senator Franken talked about the lifetime wage gap. Let's add it up and look at what the wage gap costs a woman in economic security over her career. If we don't close the wage gap, a woman starting her career now stands to lose over $430,000 over a 40-year career. That's a house. That's a retirement. That's several college degrees lost. That means the typical woman will need to work 11 years longer to make what a man makes in an average 40-year career. In 7 states, this lifetime wage gap amounts to more than $500,000. And those are the numbers for all women. When we look specifically at women of color, this lifetime wage gap is even more staggering. For African American women, the lifetime wage gap totals $877,000. And for Latinas, it's over $1 million. In fact, if we look state by state, Asian American women lose more than $1 million to the lifetime wage gap in 1 state. African American women lose more than $1 million in 6 states. Native American women lose more than $1 million in 13 states. And Latinas lose more than $1 million in 23 states to the lifetime wage gap. Right here in the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, African American and Latina women are struggling under the worst lifetime wage gap in the nation. African American women in D.C. will experience career losses amounting to nearly $1.6 million, and Latinas stand to lose $1.8 million over the course of their career. The wage gap hasn't budged in nearly a decade, and as a result, women are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars over their working years. We literally can't afford to ignore this, and that's why we need real solutions like the Paycheck Fairness Act. Having an economy that works for everyone starts by ensuring that women are paid the same as men for equal work. And the Paycheck Fairness Act would put teeth in our laws to help end pay discrimination and close the wage gap. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Matz. I'm the Vice President for Government Relations at the American Association of University Women. I'm here really to say one thing. The pay gap is real. It's not myth, it's math. And girls can do math. We understand how this impacts our lives. Critics like to charge that the pay gap is just a result of women's choices, that somehow not only do we make this particular choice, but that those choices themselves are somehow unconstrained by bias, outright discrimination, lack of opportunity. Of course, that's not the case. One of the things AAUW decided to do in response to a lot of claims trying to denounce the pay gap is to say, okay, let's do that study. Let's control for all those factors that reasonable people might think should impact your wages. And here they are, and I have to read them because there's so many I can't memorize them. We did a regression analysis for college major, occupation, economic sector, hours worked, months unemployed since graduation, GPA, type of undergraduate institution, institutional selectivity, age, geographical region, marital status, and the kitchen sink. We did a regression analysis for all of that. About as equal as you can be 1 year out of college, there was a 7% gap for equal pay for equal work. The reality is, though, we also have detractors who say, oh, 7%, that's not a big deal. AAUW says the wage gap has been closed. I would defy them, of course, to give me 7% of their wages every year. Suddenly that 7% isn't so small, isn't so insignificant, especially when you give up the compounding wages and the benefits that you get based on your wages throughout your career. So after accounting for this litany of factors, we know the wage gap is real. There's some good news here. This is an issue that the American public supports. This is an issue that the American public, and in fact the voters, know is real. We must close the wage gap. It is pernicious, it is persistent, it is affecting families every day, and now is the time. The good news is we also have some Republican friends who are starting to care about this issue too. But we have to be vigilant because we cannot take half solutions. We have to make sure that we are addressing the full gap, the gap as it affects all women, women of color, moms, older women. And that means the Paycheck Fairness Act. So AAUW stands here obviously in clear, strong support, not only of Senator Mikulski and her work on this bill, but of course our champion on the House side, Rosa DeLauro. And we want to make sure that we get this message clear and loud and clear through to everyone on Capitol Hill, but also to the voters. We will hold our elected officials accountable in November. The equal pay issue is going to be an issue in the election, and voters will go to the polls based on whether or not their candidates care about this issue and talk about it. We're here for the Paycheck Fairness Act. We won't stop till it's passed. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Ruth Martin, a Senior Campaign Director at MomsRising. I'm also a Maryland mom, so I am particularly thrilled to stand with Senator Mikulski. I'm also the mom of two little girls, so my interest in fair pay is not just personal, it's not just professional, it's also personal. These days, the maternal status is actually a greater predictor of wage inequality than gender. Women today, as you've heard, earn on average 79 cents to $1, but moms earn 73 cents to the dollar, and the gap is even larger for moms of color. That means that even with their brains and their spirit, their ambition, their curiosity, my daughters won't be earning the same as Vicky's son when they're in their careers. And I can't stand for that, and none of us can. Every day at MomsRising, we hear from moms who are working hard, they're playing by the rules, but they're struggling. For instance, Betty from Sarasota wrote to us and told us that she raised 4 boys on her own without their father's help, and she had to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and the reason why is because of the gap between men and women's pay. We needed the Paycheck Fairness Act yesterday. We need it today. We cannot wait until our children have children of their own to get this done. It is time to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy Cheney, and I want to thank Senator Mikulski and all of the senators and my colleagues here for having us here today to talk about something we've all been talking about for far too long, the gender wage gap. I'm here on behalf of Equal Pay Today campaign, a coalition of state and national women's-based legal and workers' rights organizations, some of which are in this room. Together, we are working to close the wage gap by focusing on the key contributors to the gap, including pay discrimination, pay secrecy, job segregation, pregnancy and caregiver discrimination, wage theft, and yes, inadequate minimum wage. No longer willing to wait for congressional action, realizing that our nation's women need and deserve equal pay. Our partners have begun fighting for stronger equal pay enforcement laws at the state level. Last year, equal rights advocates led the way towards passage of the California Fair Pay Act, which was based on the Paycheck Fairness Act. The bill passed nearly unanimously with bipartisan support and became the strongest equal pay law in the country. Imagine that. And in Minnesota, Gender Justice worked to pass the Women's Economic Security Act, which strengthened enforcement of state equal pay laws and increased pay transparency. And we have not stopped there. Our other state projects and partners are seeking to close the gender wage gap in Illinois, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Washington State, and elsewhere. Yet as we do this work coast to coast, one question keeps coming back. Why should the right to fair pay depend on what state you live in? Equal pay for equal work is a legal and moral imperative. Don't all our nation's women, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, and socioeconomic status, deserve equal pay for equal work? The members of the Equal Pay Today campaign certainly think so. And thus we are proud to join this group and all Americans in calling for and demanding passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act so that all working women and the families and communities who depend on them will be able to reach their full economic potential. The time for talking is over. We need Congress to act to make the need for Equal Pay Day history. Thank you.
We are all here. Again, this is Lisa Matz from AAUW, available for questions. I wanted to get in one last stat that many of our organizations have come up with through our various research. If we don't do anything, if we simply just let market forces, if we simply just let the culture correct itself, we will finally close the pay gap in a little over 100 years. It's just another reason why we can't wait. So if there are any questions, particularly from the press, please identify yourselves, and we are happy to answer whatever we can, my colleagues and I. And I can wait for Bueller and Bueller. as much as you need. No? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Please remember the Fair Pay Coalition, the groups up here, the National Women's Law Center, Equal Pay Today, MomsRising, the National Partnership for Women and Families, and the American Association of University Women are your resources moving forward in terms of Equal Pay Day next April 12th. And bear in mind that throughout the year we will be celebrating other Equal Pay Days, Mom's Equal Pay Day, African American Women's Equal Pay Day, alas, Latina Equal Pay Day, which is almost totally towards the end of the year. So we will be talking about this until we don't need to talk anymore because the bill has been passed. Thanks, everybody.